Okay, so good morning. Today is Monday, and Monday is always another day when we're here to bring to you live from our studios another version and another presentation of the 7:30 Academic Call. Remember that every week we run Monday to Friday, and on Mondays it's myself with Unleashing Your Destiny and topics around the same. On Tuesdays we have Sunshine Sylvia that runs with Mindset Change Program. Very, very impactful teaching. Wednesdays, we have a variety of input on that particular day. And then on Thursday, we have Dr. Nelly with her very powerful teaching around prosperity for your soul. And then on Friday, we have Dr. Jackie who comes through and presents her segment, which deals with the topic of life and health tips. So these are the five particular shows, presentations that we have Monday to Friday. And today I'm glad to have you all join us on the various platforms. Either you'll be watching this on Facebook, welcome. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, thank you for being part of what we're doing. And if you're watching this on on YouTube, my YouTube channel, thank you for being part of it. Remember to subscribe and become a part of what we are doing. We're always glad to have you here and always glad to have you part of what we try to do. So today being Monday, I am building and continuing my series. As you know, I've been running and building and consolidating the topic of scaling. So remember, there are basically 4 tips to bootstrapping. And bootstrapping is the concept of using resources within and around you to build and establish your business. And bootstrapping is a very, very powerful concept when done correctly. And of course, we are a big part of that. So we've been telling you that in bootstrapping, there are basically 4 phases: the starting phase, the validation phase, the optimization phase, and then the scaling phase. So starting is, of course, starting, and we know about that already. That's really your idea, whatever it is, and then take that and start running with it. And then you've got the next phase after starting, which is the validation. So take the idea and make it validated. So the first year to 3 years is usually the validation phase. And in validation, what you're doing is proving that what you have works out there and there's people that want that material. So that's the validation. And then after validation comes the next phase, which is the optimization. So once you got this right, you've made back your initial input, now you are optimizing. So you're trying to get all the systems in place, trying to get all the different aspects of the business to really lock in. And remember, in the optimization stage, especially looking at 4 components in there, you've got the obvious in terms of the tools that help to make your business run. Then you've got the processes. That means how you connect between one system and the other, one business model and the other. And then on the third phase, you've got the processes. Sorry, you've got the tools, process, systems. Now remember, systems are what make or automate the business. So then after these 3, within the same period also, especially when you're going through processes, you also bring in people. So people are the 4th very, very important component that help to solidify everything you're doing. So these 4 then form the full flux of what is your business. So today we're looking at the next phase, which is optimization, which is scaling. And we've been looking at various aspects of scaling. Today I want to look at financing, because that is one of the biggest challenges with a lot of businesses. A lot of people ask, how do you finance? How do you get a business financed in this day and age, considering all the challenges that come? There's been a lot of talk around the fact that, there's no money in the country, there's no connections, hey, there's no this, there's no that. There's a lot of complaints. But the funny thing is, even with all the complaints, even with all the negative talk, all you need to do is just take a walk or a drive any weekend and go to major spots in the city, and you will see large numbers of people, revelers, either purchasing items off the big supermarkets like ShopRite, or you find them at bars and common popular night spots, and you say, okay, there's no money, but here's a whole bunch of people spending money. So truth of the matter is, the money is there. The only issue is, how do we get to maximize? How do we get to access that and make it really happen? I think that's the usual biggest challenge that a lot of people face when it comes to these issues. So today, I think I want to really delve a bit deeper into sources of financing SMEs in Zambia today? That's pretty much the topic. Sources of financing SMEs in Zambia today. So the number one excuse given by many people as to why business fails in Zambia is that they cannot access financing. This is a very, very common reason, okay? Whilst there is some truth to this, the factors are more complex than meets the eye, okay? So according to research carried out by finance expert Trevor Hambai of Development Finance Associates, a good buddy and colleague, he said, listen to this, from a survey carried out among SMEs, this is so interesting, 91% failed due to delayed payment and inability to access short-term credit. That means letters of credit, invoice discounting, overdraft facilities. This is the 91% reason for many SMEs failing. Then 64% is due to price competitiveness or unsustainably low margins. Okay, and then 37% is due to undercapitalization, and then 8% due to poor management and corporate governance. So imagine, less than 10% is poor management and corporate governance. So that's a really small reason amongst the reasons. Amazing. Then the other ones are the ones that are very interesting, okay? 37% undercapitalization. So a lot of our SMEs today are undercapitalized. What does that mean? That means even for those that manage to access financing, they don't access enough. And one of the major reasons they don't access enough is because A, they don't either have the collateral or the right financial backing to start with to actually access what they need. And then two, more importantly, when they do access the financing, they end up paying large or high fees associated with the loan. This is a very, very common scenario where you have loans that are available, but when you're accessing those loans, a percentage of the access funds go towards paying for the loan itself. And so normally, on average, it's somewhere around between 15 to 24% of what you request for. In some instances, even 30%, depending on, but it's rare. It's usually 15 to 24% of what you're asking for. So what does that mean in English? It means if you're borrowing 10,000, kwacha 2.4 thousand is going towards the so-called loan facilitation. And they usually deduct that from the money that they're lending you. That really makes undercapitalization almost guaranteed. So meaning already from the word go, you're already on a handicap when it comes to the money you borrow. 64% price competitiveness or unsustainably low margins. This is usually the case, especially in the fast moving consumer goods space. There are very large players in the market, so what a number of those players will do is they'll literally underprice you, and they'll sustain that because obviously they already have the means to run and do what they do, and so they'll literally just underprice you and they kill you off from the word go, and that becomes extremely difficult to match their price level. So for example, there's a drink like Chiwantu, very popular, and Chiwantu has just been picked up by one of the biggest FMCG company in the country. But there were individuals, I knew personally, two of my colleagues that started off that business and did it very well, and they were already gaining access into the major distribution networks in the country, and then the large guys just came and cut them off by underpricing, number one, and number two, sending the dogs after them, as we call it, the Zambia Revenue Authority and other such regulatory people. Now, this is all good in love and war, but the truth of the matter is that still messed that company up, and they found themselves unable to run with the whole entire process. And then, of course, I think the biggest issue is the 91% SME failure due to their inability to access short-term credit. So what kind of short-term credits do we have in the country? I will be looking at that, okay? So I will be dealing with that, and hopefully for people like yourselves, if you do your homework, you'll be able to get this going. I just like what Sunshine Sylvia said. She says, you can say that again, financing money is there, but how to align it, okay? Got an experience as I was dealing with the sickle cell celebrations. Credit worthiness made it possible to run or build or create a successful event without money. Very true. And that's really what the purpose of this particular presentation today is. I'm going to show you how that's possible, okay? So now, seeing how serious the first two items I mentioned, which is the 91% failure due to delayed payments and inability to access credit, and number two, which is due to price competitiveness, I am going to show you how we kind of sidestep that. So it has become imperative that as a business is growing, the issue of financing must take priority. You will realize that even through bootstrapping, or rather, even though bootstrapping can work, can and does work, there is a level where that just won't cut it anymore, and the need for some form of financing must be utilized. Okay, I am now going to outline several available sources, and then we'll cover them in broad strokes, of course, as options here in Zambia. This is, of course, specific to Zambia. So if you're watching this from Nigeria, you're watching this from South Africa, from the UK, from the US, diaspora, obviously this is going to be different, and we'll have different situations with each country. But as a general rule of thumb, these exist in many, many places. So let's begin with sources of financing. So there are traditional financing options that include loans, equity finance, grants, invoice discounting, corporate bonds, lease finance, supply. Now these are real, right? Supplier credit, equity mortgage releases, SME collaboration and clustering, pre-order financing, which is where letters of credit come in, and venture capital. So we're gonna kind of try and zero in on the most popular ones in this country. Now, somebody's like, Rev, you went too fast, you went too fast. Okay, let me just go through them again. Loans, equity finance, grants, invoice discounting, corporate bonds, lease finance, supplier credit, equity and mortgage release, SME collaboration and clustering, pre-order financing through import-export, letters of credit and the like, as well as venture capital. So that's 11 different options available as we speak. So let's start with the first one, most obvious one, which is personal savings, family, friends, and relatives. This is the true bootstrapping aspect. And remember, when we save, and this is why I always say this, when you save, the whole aim of your saving is to make sure you build enough so that you can capitalize a business. I'm not a big one for saving for the sake of saving, because we know very well that currency is not real. Those pieces of paper are as fake as they come. The only reason they work is because very powerful regulators with draconian power back those papers up. So A, nobody can copy them. B, they have very strict rules around their governance, and so as a result of that, they stabilize the entire finance system. When you take those powers out of the picture, the currency ceases to have any kind of use. So this is why it's so important. When you go to countries where there's no functional government to talk about, you notice that their local currencies mean jack. Somalia is a good example. Afghanistan is another good example. There are enough countries in the world where you have pretty much nothing to talk about as far as local currency is concerned. And so they have to rely on the US dollar or other such foreign currency. So this is because there is no system to govern its maintenance. So anyway, so savings. So savings are very, very important. As you already may be aware, this whole training is part of a series on bootstrapping and is immensely detailed in context. In a nutshell, bootstrapping is the concept of building a business from scratch using available personal resources, including money. Okay, so you got money, time, effort, skill, networks, available assets, and the like, without borrowing from traditional lending institutes or getting formal financing. And this is why your savings, friends, and family become very, very cardinal. Where one is trustworthy, this can be a great source of financing the business fairly well. So it's a really, really powerful thing. And you find that when you actually work with this, you'll be stunned to learn how powerful some of these methodologies around your personal savings can work. So that's why you find I'm big on the idea of saving in this manner. So for example, we've got what I call the 7 capitals. I teach a lot on the 7 capitals. What are the 7 capitals? Number 1 is talent capital. Number 2 is information capital. Number 3 is blessing capital. Number 4 is vibrational capital. Now these 4 have a lot to do with your internals. And then number 5 is relationship capital. That's where now the idea of connecting with people, knowing people, building relationships around you, that's where it really takes on a new meaning. So this relationship capital really kicks in. And then when you run those relationships well, then the sixth capital kicks in, which is trust capital. Trust capital is insanely powerful. And that's pretty much the difference, for lack of a better word, is the difference between, for example, the Asians in our country. Asians and white Zambians seem to do far better than, indigenous Zambians. And one of the reasons is because they've built trust capital around their operations. So they've got relationships, very strong relationships, and then they've got trust capital. And then finally, based on these two, they catapult into the seventh one, which is social capital. All these are capitals that don't need cash. And using that, if you know how to wield these well, you will be amazed, especially the last three. The last three, which is trust, relationship, trust, and social capital, can give you the necessary push to get you ahead. I mean, Uncle Benjamin is on the call, and I didn't ask him, but I'm going to just use one of his own very, very powerful examples he used in one of his earlier books. And I mean, we spoke about it on radio when he featured on my show. Uncle Benjamin mentioned an incident where some years back, when he was still, kind of getting his business off the ground, the BUK truck parts, he had an incident where his container, they basically stole stuff off his container. He had ordered a container out of India or wherever it was. And as it came, there was a problem in Dar es Salaam, I believe, and all his goods were stolen. And this is like back in the early days when he would bring all these containers in and then obviously push all these goods to the various suppliers wherever he was supplying. And that really set him back in a bad way. Now, this was a container, if I'm not wrong, worth about $30,000 worth of stock, all gone, disappeared. Now, because of the relationship that Uncle Ben had built with these suppliers and the fact that he was very consistent in paying them, when the suppliers learned of his dilemma, they were willing to send him another container purely on trust. And they did do that. I mean, there's all the dynamics to what happened, but the long and short of it is that they did send another container his way, and he was able to now use that to make his sales. Of course, he was set back and he paid that and then was able to move on. The only reason he was able to do that without borrowing per se was because he had built very powerful relationship with these suppliers, and more importantly, trust. He had demonstrated trust because he was able to pay on time, and that meant even without any really formal ways, the collateral ways, this ways, that, they were able to agree to extend him credit. This is what I'm talking about, my friends, when I talk about relationship, trust, and social capital. Social capital is a different one, but these two are very powerful. Now, lease financing. Now, this type of financing is one where a lender or leaser finances a business, thereafter known as a lessee, but retains ownership of equipment or assets purchased by the lessee for an agreed period of time and make payments until they clear the loan, after which the ownership of the asset transfers to the lessee or lessee. Now, remember, they were leasing. So for example, maybe you run a factory, so they can lend you the money, and then the factory equipment, everything sitting in that factory actually still belongs to the person who lent you. So that way, it locks up their security. That's the equipment. They can still have that back if you fail to pay. Now, this is a great way to finance business because the very equipment or assets purchased are typically the collateral. And typically, lending tends to work as a partnership between the vendors of the equipment or vehicles, the assets, insurance companies, and the banks and lenders. And recently, a couple of years back, PACRA took it to the next level. They introduced what they term the moving assets registration or something in those lines. I've just forgotten the name of it, but it's a whole new component within the PACRA Act, which meant that moving equipment could now be secured even though it moves. So for example, the construction equipment. This was one of the biggest problems, the graders, the mazembes, as we call them in Zambia, and all those forklifting and heavy equipment stuff. Very, very expensive, very, very expensive, and a very powerful asset. But those for a long time were not able to be used in this manner because there was no certification of any sort. But now that PACRA did this, it changed completely the narrative, and now this is actually something that can be, used as collateral because it's registered as a moving piece of equipment. So that was really powerful. The other one is supplier credit. Now, supplier credit is exactly like what happened with Uncle Ben that I just gave as an example earlier on, where this is perhaps one of the best ways of obtaining financing, as this typically involves suppliers extending credit for an agreed period of time, anywhere from 14 to 60 days. And this, though, only works where good reputation and trust have been in existence. That's where now you see relationship capital as well as trust capital. You see that when those are in place, this supplier credit can kick in. Many may not realize this, but large-scale companies like the supermarkets in Zambia work using credit extended by micro and small enterprises through their invoicing system, where suppliers are typically paid between 14 to 30 days. And this gives enough working capital for the larger entities to balance their cash flow and meet operational costs using interest-free credit. And this also works for agents and vendors who have a good working relationship with manufacturers or service providers, and where consistency in sales is seen, suppliers are happy to increase the credit extended, which then makes it easier for the vendor or agent to thrive better. Now, this is really, really powerful. I've got a good young man who is a mentee of mine. He is now operating in millions of kwacha. He's got very large capital for him. I know where he's coming from. So to see him build that kind of capital, his capital sits at between 50 to 100 million kwacha now. Amazing to see him build that level of capital. Where is his money coming from? It's coming from this. I know for a fact that this young man, just his stock alone, the credit stock that sits in his workshop is about 20 million. 20 million. And he has access to further credit of up to 50 million. So even though we can say he's sitting on stock for 50 to 70 million, it's not his money. It's just stock that has been extended by suppliers, because suppliers have become very, very comfortable and know that he has what it takes. And it's extremely... Oh, I need a mic for better sound. Yes, I do, Marshall. So Marshall's just telling me that I need a mic for better sound. Yeah, we're working on that. We're working on that. So like I was saying, that ability of his to extend this, to get credit from suppliers has made it very powerful and possible for him to do business. So he does steel, he does livestock, he does electronics. And I know for a fact that he can walk into... In fact, he doesn't even have to walk. He just calls his suppliers. There are key electronic suppliers in this country, quite well established agencies of various big brands like the Infinix, Intel. Is it called Intel? I've forgotten the name of it. ITEL. I'll say ITEL. And the one in the middle, I think I've forgotten the name. It's just gone. Techno. So it's Infinix, Techno, and ITEL. These are all sitting under one brand, and these brands are licensed by a number of key Zambian companies. And my colleague has credit lines, so he can easily pick up a phone and say, give me 5 Infinixes, give me 3 this, give me 10 of that, give me 20 of that. And they'll give him and they'll just invoice, and 14 days later. It's amazing. And he can do that with steel as well. He's got very, very good relationships with steel as well. And then also he's also been able to build a very good relationship with livestock as well. And how is this possible? It's possible because he has been a very consistent builder of a relationship between himself and those who supply him. So a lot of people listening to me today, you're crying about credit, no access to this, no access to that. How is your relationships? How are you building them with those that supply you? So this has worked very well for a number of agents I know, and they've built really, really powerful businesses. I've seen it for myself because they've been consistent in being able to do what I've just mentioned. Now, there's another one, which is internal revenue, okay? Now, with internal revenue, this is where one uses the power of sales and recapitalization to grow the business. Typically, this tends to work better in businesses that utilize services more than stock, okay? Like us, myself, Sunshine, Dr. Nelly on this call. That's what we do. And the process begins with the acquisition of orders for which deposits are paid, and then that money finances the final product. And the key then lies in increasing the volume or turnover so that the capital increases. Okay, and when coupled with good corporate governance and financial discipline, many companies have been able to achieve organic growth with zero financing from outside. Speaking from experience again. Okay, however, I must emphasize that this scenario is unique to a limited sector of the entrepreneurial landscape and is not true of most. And in view of the challenges of financing today, however, the need to think outside the box and find innovative ways of self-financing must come in, and using this model is one of the most ideal options. Another one which is very, very powerful is where the owners of the company, we call this shareholder contribution. So the owner of the company contributes equity in the form of actual cash. Okay, this may also determine percentage of the share contribution. And this kind of financing is the best because there is no pressure to pay back the money, but instead to allow it to grow. And this is why this type of financing is best, as it allows the business to actually first become profitable before paying back any long-term financing. I mean, good examples include, sorry to use this as an example, but it's true. Care Peak Hospital for Dr. Mjajati is a classic example where key shareholders pull in money. And it's not the only one. There are so many Chiwamakanyama's bridges, same story. Key shareholders pull in their money, and then after pulling in their money, they are able to run with the business. And the beauty with pooled money like that is that it can stay as directors' contributions until a time when actual profits are really being registered. Like I told you, a lot of businesses can take years to break even, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Well, not break even, but to literally become sustainable. Because even if they break even and make back the capital, you can't take that money because you still need that capital to cycle enough so that all the different processes in the business can reach a point where they are solid enough to stand and to finance fully. In short, profits start being registered, and that takes very long. For the typical business, 5 years. So a lot of times in the beginning, you need that money. And this is why loans at the start of a business, this is my parting word. Never borrow to start. I'm going to say that again. In fact, let me even type it. Let me just type it because it's too serious. Never borrow to start. Ever. So never borrow to start ever, because when you borrow to start, your money that would have been used to build your business goes to paying your loans. It goes to paying back those you owe. So your capital doesn't have enough time to grow. That's why I honestly never do that. If you can, get someone to finance it. Okay, get someone to finance it and let them run. Sunshine also adds a very, very good comment here. Let me just highlight it and you see it for yourself. But she says, yes, indeed, pulling in resources to do the things you like, which if alone is not possible. This is the genesis of the 730 Academy International. We are going places because we pooled our resources. We all bring in very powerful components of what we do, and by pulling our resources together, we're able to achieve what we're achieving right now in a powerful way. I mean, look at the quality of our transmission. I know you're not supposed to praise yourself, but you see, we've upgraded now. We have a much better looking format and presentation. We look far more professional. You know why this is so? Because we've pulled our resources together as individuals that present on these segments, and by so pulling our resources together, we're able to present a far higher, more quality presentation for all of you out there. And this, my friends, is the difference between remaining mediocre and taking yourself to a higher, excellent standard. Last but not least, and I have to close now, is invoice discounting. I don't know if companies are still offering that, but it's still common. But you know, Zambia had very bad experiences in the past. But basically, invoice discounting is where once orders have been secured and the local purchase order exists, financing is offered to fulfill the order, and payments are then made to the financier once client pays. This is invoice discounting. One of the most powerful initiatives I know was a company, an organization called Ulendo under Focus Finance, who were working to they created a whole full, how can you put it? There was a lot of money that was pulled in through the alternative markets into that company, because the aim was to finance all the organizations that were going to be receiving orders from government through the massive infrastructure projects that were going to take place during the Patriotic Front regime era. Unfortunately, unforeseen to them, government just didn't pay on time, and that led to a very, very sad situation. You saw a lot of people lost money. That whole entire organization went under. But the idea was very, very good. It was not a fault of their own. It was purely just the inability of government to pay on time. But the idea of invoice discounting is very powerful. A lot of microfinances still offer it, albeit they use very, very high interest, which makes it really tricky. In closing, some extra comments. Auntie Sylvia here, she says, let's see, you know, this thing hangs sometimes, so you miss. If the bank will not trust you, if the bank will not trust you, you know the dangers. You can always go to that circle inside. And another one is Marshall. Marshall says, okay, but borrow to do what? That's the whole point. Exactly. Don't ever borrow to start, because you don't even know what you're starting for. So avoid like the plague. Mildred says it's a powerful presentation. And Healing Hub here says, indeed, we too feel the effect of upgrade. Cool stuff. Also, she's appreciating, of course, she or he, I've never known Healing Hub if it's a woman or a man, is appreciating what we're presenting through this new platform. So to all of you, thank you for being part of what we're doing. Next week, I will be looking at the third aspect of scaling the business, and that is securing your sales. This is a very important component. A lot of you don't want to miss this, because in that particular presentation, we are actually going to focus on how to ensure you get the best of your sales. So from myself and all of us on the 7:30 call, thank you for being a part of us. Remember, we run these every single day, Monday to Friday, so do not miss tomorrow when we'll share. So we have unique links now. Let me close with this. We have unique links, so we're not sharing the same link because we've changed the format completely. We are doing things via this platform. That means you watch us through one of the online platforms, either YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, or whatever people use as a platform. We share them in our messages. Thank you for being part of us, and we'll catch you again on our next coming transmission, which is tomorrow with Sunshine Sylvia.